Osney Grange is a sleepy village located in the hills of the Hampton. This sounds like a wonderful weekend to spend with the Reverend and his sister. Curate and Curability is the second scenario in the Host and Hostility 3-scenario book written by S.R. Sellens, which is for Call of Cthulhu in the Regency era. Now, because I love one scenarios, I am planning to review all 3 of them and give my ranking of how strong each of those scenarios are, so stay tuned to the end of the video where I give the ranking for this scenario. And as a quick note, I want to thank all my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for your help in keeping these videos going. If you are interested in joining my Patreon page and you haven't yet, check out the description below. This scenario is designed for 1 keeper and 1 investigator, and it's a shorter scenario, I would say 2 to 3 hours to complete. So it's really good if you want something that is a quick to prep and quick to play at the table type of scenario. This takes place in 1812, and the investigator starts in the seaside town of Brighton, where they're able to get a little bit of gossip and a vibe for the time period before they go to the more eerie countryside of Hampshire. The investigator will receive an invitation from a new friend, Eleanor Mortimer. They are invited to spend the weekend with her and her brother, who is a reverend whose wife recently passed. And that's really all they get to know. So from here on out, there will be spoilers. The background of what's really going on here is Henry Mortimer. He married Charlotte, who unfortunately was cursed and turned into a ghoul. Now, Henry and his sister, Eleanor, basically lied to friends and family that Charlotte had actually died, when in fact she is still alive. She's just in the later stages of being in the ghoul transformation, and she had to be hidden away from society. Now, they found out that they can actually pass this ghoul curse on to someone else, and that's what they're trying to do, and they've decided that the investigator is a suitable host for this ghoul curse. I found the timeline on page 31 really helpful, as I could center myself and also use this as a reference throughout gameplay if I forgot about what specifically the timeline was. The investigator starts in Brighton, and to be honest, they didn't have a lot of information to go off of to feel motivated to research the Reverend and his family. So this might happen, and the investigator could just go straight to Hampshire, which would be okay. It's not really a big deal if they don't do research. You can move some of the gossip items that are listed in this section into the village in Hampshire instead. The next location is the vicarage, and you will notice that there are some signs of neglect here, and there will be several rooms for your player to explore. My biggest tip for this scenario is to add a little bit more tension and creepy moments throughout. So because my investigator didn't actually go up the chimney or end up finding the remains in the church, those are 2 of the creepiest moments leading up to the climax. And because those weren't there, I felt like there wasn't a ton of tension throughout the scenario. So consider adding some more like scratching sounds or whatever you can to lean into making this place feel really uneasy for the investigator. There's a nice section that will lay out what happens at specific times, like when dinner is, or when there's opportunity for the investigator to go to the village. On the first night, there are a couple things happening. In particular, I really recommend having the scene of the ghostly figure out the window when the investigator is trying to go to bed. Now, this was really helpful because, and it's even mentioned this in the scenario, that a lot of the playtesters had assumed this was a ghost story, and there was a nice twist at the end with it being a ghoul instead, and that happened for my player as well. So really leaning into the fact that it could be a ghost was helpful to bring a little bit of flavor to this scenario. And it also gives them a reason to investigate the church a little bit more closely, so perhaps they might end up stumbling on the remains. And I would highly recommend not to lock the library because there are a couple really good clues and handouts there that will be helpful for your player to get a little bit more sense of what's going on. And in particular, this handout too is very beautiful, and so it would be a really cool opportunity for your player to find that. Moving to the village, your player will likely spend some time getting some gossip. Really, the most important thing is to stress that the burial of Charlotte was really rushed, because this is going to trigger them to think about this, something isn't right with that situation. And so it's going to get them more curious and perhaps looking into things more closely at the vicarage after they spend some time gathering that gossip. But eventually it will all lead to the ritual. So before the ritual, likely there will be dinner. This is a great opportunity for spot hidden rolls to have the investigators see that they aren't eating beef like their other friends at the table. It's really human flesh, but they might not be able to tell exactly what it is, unless of course they find that fingernail in their soup. Eventually, it will lead the investigator up to the attic, likely tied into a chair as they start the ritual. And this reveal of Charlotte was awesome. You'll see the portrait here of her. She is looking very creepy. And again, if they thought up until this point that it was more of a ghostly story happening, then this twist will add nice spice to the scenario. How it ended for my player is the ghoul curse was passed on to the investigator, and they ended up spending the rest of their days in a ghoul colony. Now, one critique that the player had noted was it felt like they didn't really have a ton of choice for how this played out. At the end of the day, it did feel like it was more of a story being explored and experienced rather than having a ton of different choices for a role-playing game. My player still wanted to interact with the story, so running away from the vicarage didn't really seem like a great option because he didn't have enough knowledge really to make that decision. He didn't know what was going on, so it didn't feel like the right opportunity to run away. And so by the time the dinner came around and he got drugged, he just didn't get very lucky on his rolls and the curse transferred to him. So that transitions well into my overall thoughts about Curate and Curability, which is, I think that this is actually the weakest of the three scenarios. And it's exactly for that reason, is I felt like it was more of a story being experienced and less about having a lot of different options and agency to see and play this game out. However, I did feel like this had a lot of character-driven horror and did a good job and laid the foundation for having a creepy atmosphere. Plus, like I mentioned before, it is really quick and easy to prep and relatively quick to play at the table as well. So that is my review for the scenario, and stay tuned and subscribe if you would like to hear my thoughts on the third scenario in the Host and Hostility book. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.